You know, when I was in law school, from 1976 to 1970, I worked for the State Department of Justice. I was assigned to the Commission of Correction that ran all of the state prisons and supervised the county jails. We didn't even do body cavity searches on a regular basis back then. We didn't do it. It was, yeah, we strip searched them, and it was like, grab your goods and lift them up. Ladies, grab your breasts and lift them up. Bend over, squat, and cough. But we did not put the gloves on to do vaginal or anal body cavity searches. Open up your mouth, and you take a flashlight and go, you know. And that was 40 years ago. We didn't do it 40 years ago, so why on God's earth would a school do that now? It just doesn't make sense. Don't leave your common sense at home. If it doesn't make sense, it's a pill. It's not even a narcotic. It's not even a classified. It's not even illegal to possess. It's against school policy. So don't do that, please. Academic freedom and freedom of expression. The administration can decide what's going to be taught. They can have syllabuses, they can tell you what to teach, they can tell you not what to teach. There was a Philadelphia teacher who was an activist who every year spent a half a day talking about societal injustice and its effect on people. And the school told him repeatedly, don't do that, it's not part of the curriculum. So they attempted to fire him because of it. It went up to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court and they said, look, you know, it was a half a day out of 180. It wasn't that big a deal. And this is an important societal issue. And he was a history teacher, for God's sake. And so they said that was okay. But it's not okay if you want to talk about Martians on a prolonged basis every week. I mean, that's really not a societal issue of great importance. So there is a curriculum. You're expected to follow the curriculum. If you don't follow the curriculum, they can deal with it. Copyright law. We all violate it. It's my understanding there's maybe one music student here, because I like to pick on music students. You buy the sheet music, and the band director makes 400 copies of them, so everybody can have it. That's a violation of the copyright law. Orchestra, bands, choir. Plays, classic example. You cannot violate federal copyright law, and they're getting a lot more aggressive. The same with computer software. So I like to tell the story that the history teacher wants to teach a lesson based upon an article in Newsweek, for example. So he makes a copy of the Newsweek article, and he uses that to teach from. Well, that's okay, because there's a very limited educational exception to the copyright law. So that's okay. But when he takes that single copy of the article, and he makes 100 copies, or even 30 copies, and passes it out to every student that he has in his various classes, that's a violation of federal copyright law. So don't do it. Computer programs are another classic example of violation of federal copyright law. There's licenses. The license is good for X number of copies, unless it's freeware. Don't violate that. Teachers' private lives, we've talked about a little bit. And as I said, what 5 of 9 school board members think is bad behavior, they'll deal with it. And you can be fired for it. I guess my son talked about this when he was here last semester. This is a changing society. And somebody like me who grew up in a very conservative family in Sharon, and went to the First Presbyterian Church of Sharon, where I still belong, we had pretty conservative, strict notions of life. So You know, when one of my closest friends decided he was coming out of the closet, he was like 18 years old, and our response to him was, well, we've known that for a number of years. And then when he got AIDS and died a horrible death, I mean, AIDS is a horrible, horrible death. That's society, that's life. When you see heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, transsexual, transgender, whatever it is, let it be. Leave it alone. If you want to make judgments, make them at home. Do not make them in the school, because you will get sued. You will get sued. I had one of the first transsexual cases in both state and federal court. A guy worked for a job partnership program in Oil City, and he had, you know, longtime clients, and he was helping them get jobs. So this one longtime client walks in, and Rick is now Chris, and she looked like a linebacker wearing a skirt, and they had already had issues at the workplace of male, female bathrooms. They didn't have any joint bathrooms, and the women were upset when Rick/Chris was using the women's bathroom. And so this client walks in and goes, "Oh my God, you're wearing a skirt." And he just causes this huge, huge scene. So they fire him. Okay, not an uncommon event back then. So he files suit for transsexual discrimination. There were no cases in Pennsylvania at that time. And I figured we were in trouble. And he also, that was during the Clinton administration, which was not known for being conservative. And so he filed an appeal through the U.S. Department of Labor, because that's where his funding came from. And so we fight him and we fight him and we fight him. And we won all those cases. And I said to the client, the winds are shifting. Don't ever put yourself in that position again. Is that person a good employee? Does he or she do what they're supposed to do? If so, leave them alone. Let them be. Because especially in this day and age, if you don't, you're going to get sued, and it's going to be ugly. And one of the all-time classics in that scenario, if you think you've seen everything, he gets divorced from his wife. They have a 12-year-old son. There's a custody battle because the son does not want to go with Rick/Chris. So they're in front of a judge in Venango County, and the judge says to the 12-year-old, "Well, what's your issue here?" He goes, "I love my father dearly, but just because my father wants to jump off the cliff doesn't mean that I have to hold his hand and jump with him." And that was his comment. And so the son didn't have to go, ultimately did go. And then the ultimate kicker is that after Rick/Chris had concluded her transition surgery, he enters into a relationship with his ex-wife. So, you know, I can't make this stuff up. I'm writing my book eventually. I'm keeping the international film rights. But that's the craziness you see out there. And that was craziness 25 or 30 years ago. You can only imagine what it is now. So you need to be tolerant. You need not to judge on those types of characteristics. I mean, you can go home and go, "Oh my God, I can't believe I saw this. You know, what are we coming to?" But don't be judgmental about it in your job or in public or in school. I'm about done, I think, aren't I?
I think so.
Okay. Just want to say a couple more things. We talk about school violence. You have a duty to protect your students. Who do you protect them from? One, you got to protect them from yourself. Two, you got to protect them from others. Three, you have to protect them from yourself. And four, if you see them being abused by outsiders, you need to report that. My 17-year-old nephew blew his brains out when he was a senior in high school, and let me tell you about the impact of that. If you see depressive, suicidal, ideations, you must do something. Women, especially girls, no offense, you usually aren't terribly good at suicide. You know, really you're not. Pills, they pump the stomach, slash the wrist, not well enough. Not telling you to get better at it. If you're a guy and you have a plan and a gun, watch out. And there's a very fine line between suicide and homicide. So, you know, when they shoot their wife and then shoot themselves, they never get the order right. But if you're willing to kill yourself, you're willing to kill your wife, your kids, anybody else. So you need to be alert for that. And if you see behavior changes, you have to deal with that. For a long time, I said, you're a teacher, and I still say this. You're not their friend, you're not their buddy. You know, you don't invite them over to your house. You have to keep the relationship between the teacher and the student. But these kids, many of them come from totally dysfunctional households. My wife one time said to this 15-year-old, well, you know, why don't you get your mother to help you? And he turns to my wife and he says, Mrs. Acker, my mother walked out the door 2 years ago and I haven't seen her since. And we've known for decades the consequences of the fatherless household. That's tame in comparison to the motherless household. So you need to be aware of how dysfunctional. I used to say everybody knows the difference between right and wrong. Well, I think that's true, but they tend to forget it. You need to lead by example. You need to encourage them. You need to nurture them. You need to guide them. You need to give them the proverbial occasional kick in the butt. You need to give them confidence. You need to give them support, because in many instances, they're not getting it at home. You know, my wife has a theory that everybody's got a talent. They can be a terrible student, but there's something they can do very well. And you have to find that and you have to nurture. She had this one kid, he couldn't do anything. They do the rubber band cars. And he came in with his rubber band car that he built himself that was unbelievable. So my wife organized a competition between all the science classes, and he won, and you know, put it on the board and the photos and all that stuff. I mean, that's the stuff you have to do to encourage them. You have to try to identify their niche. What can they do? What can they do well? You have to encourage them and push them down that path. You know, the end game of school isn't merely graduation. It's transitioning to be a productive and law-abiding citizen, and you have to do that. And if you don't do it, nobody else is going to do it. Anybody that ever achieved anything has a teacher or two or three to thank for that. I know I do, and my son does, and I think he talked about that the last time he was here. So one of the great things, lawyers are legal janitors. Someone throws up on the sidewalk, they send the lawyer out, usually with the insurance company's checkbook to clean it up. You know, that's basically what I do. Teachers can turn on the light. And when that light bulb comes on in that kid's head, there is no greater accomplishment for a teacher. There's nothing more rewarding. So go out there, encourage these kids, nurture these kids, kick them in the butt, push them forward, and turn on their light bulbs. They can do something. They just need somebody to tell them that. They lack a lot of confidence. You can do this, come on, we'll do this together. You know, what do you want to do? What do you want to be? How are you going to get there? And a lot of it is not everybody's geared to go to college. And so the sin in society is someone gets out of high school, they go to college because they think that's what they should do. They're there for 6 months or a year and a half. They run up a lot of debt. They never should have been in college. And they leave and they have lots of debt. And they wasted a lot of time. So if you identify kids that really shouldn't go to college, you ought to send them in another direction. So thank you very much. Enjoy your teaching. It's a great career.
Amen. Thank you.
I'm keeping the international film rights. Aye.